Hi, I'm Anita Breen, and I play Hannah in the movie. Over the years, there have been hundreds of stories about the world within our world. But where did that idea come from?
Edmund Halley was a natural philosopher who lived in the late 1600s, and he was the royal astronomer in Britain.
Today, he's remembered for the comet named after him. He was the one who discovered that comets were not things that simply went blazing through the sky and disappeared, but in fact had long elliptical orbits. And in 1691, he proposed to the British Royal Society an idea that the Earth might be hollow, with several smaller spheres turning within each other, sort of like those Russian Matryoshka dolls. Halley also suggested that there was life inside the Earth, something for which generations of science fiction writers have thanked him ever since.
Just how did Halley think that light would get in there? How would plants grow?
Halley wasn't sure what was inside and what would make it glow. He just simply noted that there are a lot of ways to make light so that they could see.
Like many scientists at that time, he was interested in a lot of different things. There had been a period for maybe almost 100 years of no northern lights, no aurora borealis. And in 1716, there was this prolonged and beautiful and extravagant display of the aurora borealis.
And Halley said, see, these are gases escaping from the inside of the planet. This is the glowing stuff that makes it light inside.
He tied this spectacular 1716 display into basically gas leaking out of the hollow Earth.
But it turns out that Sir Edmund Halley wasn't the only guy to come up with the idea that the Earth was hollow.
John Cleave Symmes was from a prominent New Jersey family and was a sort of minor hero of the War of 1812. And then went off to be a trader in New Orleans, and somewhere came up with the idea that Earth was hollow.
He suggested that the Earth is not only hollow, but that there are vast openings at each pole through which we could go to get to this hollow Earth, and inside he was convinced lay an unspoiled paradise.
He expected to find a warm, well-stocked land full of what he called thrifty vegetables and animals, if not men. And I think he hoped that there would be people that we could initiate trade with.
Certainly in the early 19th century, nobody had been to the poles.
So it is a little ironic that ultimately Symmes' idea was what sparked enough interest for Americans to spend public money sending an expedition out, and then that expedition, of course, failed to find what he had expected to find, the holes at the poles.
So, despite proof that there was no way to enter the center of the Earth at the poles, the idea of hollow Earth just wouldn't go away.
Cyrus Teed is maybe the oddest oddball in a whole collection of them in the history of the hollow Earth. He was born in upstate New York in 1839 and had attended sort of an eccentric medical college, shall we say. It was not one of the recognized ones. In October 1869, he had been working in his laboratory like the mad scientist he was. As he later wrote about it, God visited him in the form of a beautiful woman, what better way, and told him that what we see is an optical illusion, that we're all actually living inside the hollow Earth. Based on this intelligence from God, he formed a religion he called Koreshianity and tried to get followers.
Personally, I think he was probably a very charismatic speaker. He had to have something that really attracted people.
His hollow Earth twist on it is kind of wacky, but his idea of establishing a religious commune is right in line with much thinking that was going on in the 19th century all over America.
He ultimately ended up moving to Florida and founding a community there.
Teed got a big piece of land near the beach where his followers had their school, their own bakery, a machine shop. They even made their own electricity. At the turn of the 20th century, there were hundreds of these hollow Earth believers living there. It was like a small town.
It was laid out according to very pleasing geometrical ideas. There was an art hall and a small open-air Greek-style theater near the little stream that ran through it. It was kind of a lovely, peaceful place to retreat from a lot of the chaos and ugliness that were going on in the outer world.
The Koreshans thought that the planet was a giant hollow sphere with the land and the oceans on the inside surface and the sky in the middle. Instead of living on the outside looking up, they were on the inside looking towards the center, and somehow the sun and the moon and the stars all fit in there.
I mean, you'd think it would be off-putting to would-be followers, but he insisted that it was an important part of his theology, and that also that his theology was on a scientific basis.
He decided he needed to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that we did live inside the Earth, and one of the ways to do that was proving that the surface was concave.
They invented this thing called the rectilineator. And what they did was they got an uninterrupted stretch of beach south of Fort Myers and set up the rectilineator according to very meticulous standards. And they would move one piece and then take this one and put it ahead.
They would move this machine down the beach, and they were basically trying to draw a straight line, which, if the theory were correct, would intersect the inside of this curve.
And the idea was that if they did this meticulously and precisely enough, they would eventually run into the upturning edge of the Earth. And while they didn't actually bump into the upturning edge of the Earth, they conducted the experiment for months, and to their own satisfaction proved that the Earth did indeed turn up on the edges.
But how do you explain that ships disappear over the horizon because the Earth curves down?
We know that the Earth is round and we're on the outside by the effects of gravity. Back in the Middle Ages, people built bigger and bigger churches and cathedrals, and at some point they started collapsing in on themselves. And the Earth would do the same thing. If it had a very large hollow region, then just because of the forces of gravity, it would collapse in on itself.
Even if it's not physically possible, it's still a cool idea. A secret, hidden world right under our feet, like the one Jules Verne created.
Journey to the Center of the Earth, published in 1864, might well be called a journey to the center of geology.
At the time Jules Verne wrote his novel, we knew that the inside of the Earth was hot. That was obvious just by seeing that there are volcanoes. We also saw that the surface of the Earth was being modified by the action of water, by erosion, by geological processes. But we have very little understanding of how those processes actually work.
In 1851, there was this wonderful sort of World's Fair, really, in London, and at that, the very first life-size representations of dinosaurs had been shown to the public. And one thing that Verne does, and is brilliant, is he takes this adventure story of three people going down into the earth and having all these adventures, and they encounter a battle between two giant sea monsters. And it's the very first battle of dinosaurs in literature.
Hollow Earth theories sure have made for some good stories, even if they're not good science. But does anyone still believe any of this?
Actually, Hollow Earth thinking has not died out. If you Google Hollow Earth, you get something like 2 million hits.
Some people think that UFOs are parked in the middle of the Earth, and others believe that robots live down there.
One story is that Hitler was a Hollow Earth believer. And instead of dying in that bunker in 1945, he and select aides escaped into a portal for the Hollow Earth, and Hitler's sitting down there right now plotting his next move.
Jules Verne was really onto something. Not so much the Hollow Earth, but the idea of mixing science and fiction. And I'm sure he'll continue to inspire writers and readers for generations to come.
Doesn't matter that much if some of the story is fantasy and not really based on science. If it gets people thinking about the universe in which we live and seeking more information,